Welcome to another episode of NBM Talks, a series of the Narrative-Based Medicine Lab, where we speak with individuals who are working at the intersection of literature, medicine, and health. Our guests are writers, clinicians, scholars, artists, and advocates who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the field. Together we discuss how we can engage with narrative-based medicine principles and practices in creative and diverse ways. We hope you enjoy this episode. Today's Narrative-Based Medicine Lab talk welcomes Nick Pimlott. Dr. Nick Pimlott is a family physician and writer. He's a professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the Tamarty Faculty of Medicine at U of T. He's also the editor of Canadian Family Physician, the official journal of the College of Family Physicians of Canada. He's now writing a book about family practice that's going to be published by the University of Toronto Press. Welcome, Nick. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Nick.
I was wondering if we can start with you telling us a little bit about your professional background, your road through family practice and medical practice, and especially how you came towards narrative-based medicine.
Sure. How long have you got?
As long as it takes.
Where to begin? Well, I was a graduate student before I went into family medicine, and I went from a very sort of highly specialized area of intellectual activity to becoming a generalist. It was going back to medical school sort of later than the average medical student. By the time I finished my training, I was really sort of torn between the decision to become a specialist physician or to pursue family medicine, which has a shorter training period. And so I sort of ended up making that sort of pragmatic choice, which I've never regretted. I think at heart, I'm kind of a generalist with generalist intellectual interests and so on. You know, most family doctors will say they chose family practice because they loved obstetrics, but they also loved surgery and they loved dermatology. And so because they couldn't make up their mind, they chose to become family physicians. So you could say that probably describes me to a large degree. Yeah. I was in community practice for about a year doing locums before I reconnected with the academic world. I was doing sort of medium to long-term locums in a couple of different communities, and I was really kind of looking for the opportunity to be the kind of family physician that I saw when I did my teaching practice in rural Ontario. So to really be a comprehensive generalist, somebody who looked after their patients in hospital, somebody who had an office but also did home visits and provided palliative care. And by good fortune, a mentor, teacher in my residency, Jim Kirkland, who is the head of the regional geriatrics program, connected me with Jim Ruderman, who was the head of family medicine at Women's at the time. And I met with Jim and some of his colleagues, and they hired me. And as they say, the rest is history. So yeah, that was my path. And for the first decade or so, I was able to be really that kind of small town doctor in the heart of Canada's biggest city, doing everything. I ran our family practice inpatient unit. I was on call a lot. And I did all those things. I made home visits. I used to make home visits on foot to a lot of my elderly patients who lived in the downtown core. And anybody who was sort of within easy driving distance too. And I used to provide my own palliative care to my patients. So yeah, that was the first part of my career. Things have changed, of course, as they have across the system. So now, although I still continue to do home visits towards the end of my practice life, the care I provide is more office-based. But it still requires those generalist skills because I'm looking after more complex older patients for which there's not often a lot of evidence, scientific evidence or research to support what you're doing. So you really have to be comfortable with clinical uncertainty, shared decision-making with people, trying to evaluate what's important to them in their lives. So yeah, that's been my journey as a family doctor.
Yeah, I've heard that as well, that family doctors need a high tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity because there is such a broad field, that you're working within. And, it makes me think of the emphasis in narrative-based medicine on building those skills for tolerance of uncertainty and ambiguity. And I just wondered how, your work sort of connects to perhaps your interest in narrative, in writing, because it seems like there might be many connections there.
For sure. I mean, the metaphor I sometimes use to describe life as a family doctor is it's like being a tightrope walker. You don't really want to look down or you'll lose your nerve. In other words, you don't want to think too much about the responsibility that you have 24/7, 365 days a year for a group of people who you hopefully come to know very deeply. And so that's one aspect of the job. It's a lot of responsibility. There is a lot of uncertainty. In family medicine, we see symptoms more often than we see diseases. And so that makes the job more challenging, as you need to learn to recognize, understand symptoms and how to monitor them before something, an illness declares itself. The connection to writing, I'm really drawn to the essay form. And, essay comes from the French to try. And so, in essays, you try things out. You try ideas out. You try perspectives out. And that's sort of reminds me of what it's like to be a family physician or a general practitioner. You're often kind of trying things out with patients. So, yeah, I think there's a connection there. My journey to the lab and to narrative medicine, I think really began around 12, 13, 14 years ago when we moved away from fee-for-service model of practice and became a family health team with a capitation model. And at the same time, we adopted our electronic medical record. And when we were making that transition, one of the things that we all did was to change our clinical templates. So instead of sort of seeing 4 patients an hour, for example, because we knew that there would be a bit of a steep learning curve with this transition, we scheduled fewer patients per clinic. And one of the interesting things for me was that it really opened a door to being more fully present with my patients. And that's when I started to get interested in narrative medicine. A couple of Alan Peterkin's articles were a big influence, so 10 tips for a more narrative-based practice, which started to change the way that I sort of spent time with my patients. So that's how I got interested in narrative medicine was, going from this, I'm very fond of quotes. One of my favorite quotes is from Mario Andretti, the race car driver. He says, "If everything's under control, you're not going fast enough." And that's how fee-for-service practice kind of felt to me. Like, everything was kind of just out of control. And that transition brought a lot of things under control, and by adopting a more narrative type of practice approach, it really deepened and enriched my practice life. I felt I was much more present with my patients, and I think, they're not here to gainsay it, but I think they found a difference too.
Could you go into that a little bit more, actually, in terms of the lab? You've been both a participant in lab workshops and courses, but you've also been a faculty member here and taught a workshop at the lab. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about both what you've learned and what you've tried to impart?
Well, what have I learned? Well, one of the most important questions, I think, which Alan uses in that article that he wrote is, when you meet with a patient, the first question you might want to consider asking is, tell me something about yourself that I think is important for me to know. And then listen. I think that's such a wonderful question. And it's a question you can ask somebody you've known for a long time to kind of reestablish or reconnect or, deepen the relationship. As a faculty, yes, I taught a workshop on writing with a couple of really wonderful colleagues from Halifax, Aruna Dara and Sarah Fraser, to other physicians interested in writing and narrative practice. And what's really interesting to see is how much of an interest and hunger there is amongst my colleagues to think about, to write about, to talk about their work and how it affects them, emotionally, spiritually.
You've been teaching, other physicians about writing, and you've had a long history as editor of Canadian Family Physician. I'm wondering, and you also have an interest in narrative and essay, and I'm wondering what your sense is from that about what is important to other clinicians. What do clinicians want to write about? What have you learned about what physicians really want to say in their writing, in particular the narrative and essay pieces that that must come into the journal, and I know the journal tries to also profile those.
I think most physicians, when they first start practicing, we're interested in the medicine. We're interested in the biomedical stuff. And I certainly was that way. I was kind of a very early adopter of the evidence-based medicine approach to practice. I had a research background and so on. But with the passing of time and gaining experience as a physician, I started to realize that although, being a skilled clinician from a biomedical perspective is essential, it was the other aspects of the work that I started to think about more. So, seeing my patients suffer, feeling their suffering, and wanting to help them, and processing, for example, one of the unique challenges of family medicine is that if we're lucky, we get to look after people over a very long period of time. And so you can, you establish pretty significant connections with many of the people that you look after. And when they become ill and when they die, there's loss for you. So it was those kind of issues that I turned to narrative and turned to thinking about writing in order to grapple with.
And you're working on a book now. You've had a manuscript accepted for publication. Could you?
Well, a proposal.
A proposal accepted.
And the deal's not done.
I get excited.
The deal's not done. We're still negotiating. But yeah, I've been approached within the last few weeks by an acquisitions editor at U of T Press to initially to put together a proposal, which they accepted, and the proposal is really a collection of linked essays about various aspects of the work and life of a family doctor like me.
And how are you putting that together, and how are you finding the work so far?
Well, I've written the introduction. I've written a couple of the essays already, so I'm well underway. I'm looking forward to the increased discipline of a deadline to focus the mind, because the writing that I've been doing over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I really have fit into the margins of outside my clinical time, outside of my time as the editor, which has been fine. But it means that I, probably less productive than I might like to have been. But yeah, so we'll see.
Well, we're looking forward to the results.
Yeah, I'm hoping to touch on some of the things that we've just talked about.
Yeah.
Issues like one of the issues I really want to write about is hierarchy in medicine. this sort of hierarchy between specialists and generalist doctors like family physicians. Why do we have that? Is it real? Iona Heath, who's a retired GP from the United Kingdom and a wonderful writer, in her 2011 William Harvey oration entitled "Divided We Fail," makes a very compelling argument that there shouldn't be a hierarchy. We share a common undergraduate medical education, and then when we choose to become a specialist of one kind or another, or we choose to be a generalist family physician, and we go into our postgraduate training programs, we differentiate like stem cells, and we develop a different but highly complementary set of skills, right? And one of the skills that generalist doctors develop is how to manage clinical uncertainty, for example, right? And when the two of us work at our scope, the system benefits, patients benefit. So that's, I want to address in the book, in the collection, issues, topics like that, and not just for a medical audience, but hopefully a general readership as well.
And many of our participants would like to be in your shoes or to reach that point.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for for someone who's not quite as far along in their journey, for writing advice or tips?
Well, I'd start by saying I've had lots of mentorship. Damien, you've been a mentor and a support. Shane Nielsen, Sarah Fraser, Aruna Dara, my wife, Kathy, my family, Keo McClear, who was my preceptor at the Humber Writers' School in 2018, where I was a student for a week, has been a great support, a great encourager. So I guess the first thing would be to find mentors, find people who will take an interest in you as a writer. Second thing is, writing is a craft, and there's a saying in medicine: see one, do one, teach one, which I've never really thought worked that well.
Neither do I.
But
it doesn't really work for writing very well either, does it?
Well, exactly. So I think as a physician who is interested in writing, approaching writing with that kind of outlook is not going to help you. I think you have to really try to find a way to learn the craft. And there are lots of ways to do that. So, for example, I'm interested in the essay form, and particularly the braided or lyric essay form. And I've read countless of them in order to understand how they work, in order to distinguish between the great ones and the good ones and the not so good ones. Take courses, participate in writing workshops, find ways to develop your craft, because it is a craft. And I'm just very early on that journey. I don't know where it's going to take me. But so I would say mentorship, try and learn the craft, read lots of the kind of writing that you want to do. Read it first for pleasure, but also read it with an analytical frame of mind. Try and figure out, why things work, how they work, that kind of thing. Because, the writing that I've been doing is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I think like most people interested in writing, I started out mostly interested in being a reader. I just love reading, I'm reading all the time. For me, it's like breathing. So, there's several books on my night table. There's bookshelves overflowing at home that drives my family crazy. But read lots of the kind of writing you're interested in doing. Participate in workshops, learn the craft, and find people who will encourage you.
I'm also, sort of struck by what you said earlier about, you had to fit your writing into the margins, which is, I think, an interesting way for a writer to think about it, but the margins of your life, outside your your job and other aspects of your life. And as you know, in a lot of the narrative-based medicine work, we do short prompted writing exercises, in community, in group, where we can write and share with each other and get some feedback. And sometimes those are very short. Sometimes they could be 2, 3, 4 minutes. And it's always striking what people do in terms of that fresh writing. And so I'm always encouraging people, take 4 minutes a day, take 3 minutes in between your shift or when you get home from work. So, I was struck by what you said around you had to find sort of small places to put it. You couldn't necessarily devote yourself to it full time.
No.
Yeah, and sometimes what you write in the margins is the most interesting, unexpected, original part, right?
Yeah, sometimes what's in the margins is the most interesting.
I think people approach it in different sorts of ways. I used to sort of think that, that idea that you need to set aside a certain time in your week, in your day, and do it consistently and so on was the be all and the end all. But I think that other ways can work for people too. Like I think you can write in the margins, but you have to return to it. The other kind of influence on me in terms of an approach to writing has been someone like Haruki Murakami. He wrote a wonderful book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. So I'm a runner. I've been a runner since I was 16 or 17, and it's a wonderful craft book. On the surface, it's about running, but it's really about discipline. And the other point he makes, and he also makes it in his recent book, Novelist as a Vocation or Profession, is that writing takes stamina, like real physical stamina, just like being a physician takes real physical stamina. And I think that's sometimes a kind of neglected part. You have to maintain your strength, your health, in order to support the discipline and the hard work of writing. So I love that book, and I think about that a lot. And so I try and do that too.
Well, it's been wonderful to speak with you, Nick. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to hear about both the medicine and the narrative and the combination of those two things in your work and your writing. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out many other episodes. And if you're interested in learning more about narrative-based medicine, visit us online at narrativebasedmedicine.ca for more great content and to explore our upcoming offerings.